Welcome to Kaiser Watch with John Kaiser. I'm your host, Jim Goddard.
John, what's coming up on the show today?
Jim, we're going to talk about a couple of favorites, Endurance and VR Resources, which published updates. Plus, we're going to introduce Bold Ventures. A new thing that I'm going to start doing is every Kaiser Watch episode, I will add one of my bottom fish companies to introduce people to a concept that's slightly different from what they're used to when it comes to resource juniors.
How are your favorites and bottom fish collections holding up?
Well, they're just about only doing that, holding up. They've stalled since about mid-March, been tracking sideways. As of March 27th, the 22-company favorites index was up 7% for the year, which is similar to the TSX Venture Index at 7.1%. Gold, in contrast, is up 17.1%, holding up above $3,000. That's making people mumble. They figured it would, go above 3,000 and then crash back below it. And this, of course, is largely due to Trump's policies. Every day it seems that something new and strange and unexpected happens. And it's kind of very perplexing that the equity markets have not yet crashed, that Bitcoin is still hanging in there. Both of them are poised on the edge of a cliff. And that's a bit of a problem for the resource juniors because they're all sort of cowering in the shadows at the end of a 13-year bear market, wondering if they're going to get buried by a big, giant market crash as industry gives up on Trump's policies of making America great again and start accepting that, no, it's actually going in the opposite direction. And the company that I watch the most, which is a symbol of resilience to this, perched on the edge of a cliff type situation, and that has to be Tesla. It was knocked down to about $225 a week and a half ago, but then it rallied back to $290. This is absolutely amazing. I mean, we're looking at BYD out of China. It's so obvious that they are going to crush Tesla in China itself, where Tesla is a foreign car maker competing against domestic companies such as BYD. Its self-driving technology appears to be better than Tesla's. And the newer versions that are going to be available in April, they charge faster than Tesla. Now, obviously, you can't get a BYD into the United States, but all the other countries in the world are going to be looking at the BYDs. Why, this looks like a really good electric vehicle to acquire. And, of course, within China, why would a Chinese consumer buy a Tesla rather than a BYD? So outside of the United States, Tesla's market is pretty much evaporating. And of course, the Canadians are no longer excited about Tesla. And the Europeans, the sales have declined as people sit there and look at Musk throwing his support behind Nazi sympathizers. That's not going well over there. So, but what about in the United States itself? Any liberal, the only people who bought Teslas were liberals, and they're now regretting that they did that. We're seeing cars with stickers on the back that say, I bought this before Musk went crazy, and we have a new problem of vandalism. And you can't win if you're a Tesla owner. Some left-winger is going to hate Tesla and maybe key your car or even worse, vandalize it, blow it up or something like that. But the right-wingers, they see Tesla as a symbol for the energy transition, and they believe that the climate change is a hoax. It's a fraud meant to take away their nice gasoline-powered cars. So they're not particularly keen about the Teslas. They certainly don't want to buy one, and why they might like the thuggish look of a Cybertruck. The reports that this car has been glued together, and if you drive it over anything bumpy, the parts start falling off. I think your typical MAGA person, if they want a truck, they're going to get a robust truck that does not come unglued when you try to drive it on a dirt road. And then there's the question of the aftermarket for Teslas. If you own a Tesla right now and you're thinking, oh, I don't want to come out to the parking lot and find some asshole has keyed me and I don't even know whether it's a right-winger or a left-winger, I need to get rid of it. So the aftermarket's going to soon be full of used Teslas. But who wants to buy a used Tesla? A Tesla doesn't have a spare tire. You get a flat, and these vandals, well, they take a knife to your tire, and then you're stuck. You can't. It requires a special wrench, which Tesla doesn't let the ordinary car parts retailers sell to take the wheel off. You have to call in a special Tesla service organization, which will come and fix your tire, assuming they're anywhere near within range of getting to you on a timely basis, and charge you $130 for replacing their special Tesla flat tire. So, and of course now Teslas have been around long enough for things to start going wrong. It's a highly electronic car. Electronics start to decay after a while. I mean, I've been told never ever own a European internal combustion engine car that's got more than 100,000 miles on it, because the electronics all start to go haywire after that and nobody can fix them. So the whole Tesla brand, what's the audience that's going to buy it? And I look at Tesla, and as long as it's this cult stock and it keeps bouncing back, it's a major target for short sellers. But when that collapses, that will probably also signal that the spell is over. That means even the magnificent knee bender group of companies, the enthusiasm for them will be over, and then we'll have this crash over with, and then the resource juniors can really start to flourish. And last week, Trump actually did something productive. He signed, on March 20th, he signed an executive order which finally gives some legs to this deny and delay attitude of the government agencies, the U.S. Forest Service, the BLM, with regard to permit applications. He's basically said, okay, critical minerals includes stuff like uranium, potash, and gold. And the gold is really interesting because it's kind of hard to say that it's truly a critical mineral, but if Trump says it is and is covered by this is going to open up the United States for much more aggressive exploration and mine development. And that's going to be good for the resource juniors, because what's killing them now is these lengthy delays, waiting a year for some nesting season to be observed to see if there are any raptors within 5 miles of where you plan to drill a hole type of thing. And then if you do find that here's a place where they once nested, well, you can't drill anywhere within 2 to 5 miles of that during the so-called nesting season. So all of these changes, I think, are going to be very helpful for the resource juniors. I'm of course having a lot of fun going through my bottom fish collection. I've got 108 of them. It's up 27.6%, and there's 108 of them there. So that's pretty interesting to see it up that much. I'm busy creating trackers now to explain to my subscribers here's the missing pieces. Here's why this stock is a dog, why it's so cheap. Here's what needs to change. Some of these things are beyond the control of the bottom fish. Others are within the control of it. And of course, the funding is usually a big missing piece. But if we start getting this resource sector bull market going, the funding will finally come. When it stops going into cryptocurrency and overpriced magnificent knee bender companies, then one of the big missing pieces will disappear from this market. I now have the new Kaiser Watch Substack up and running. It costs $10 per month. It's not the same thing as the Kaiser Research platform. The 450 full access to that ends on March 31st for new subscribers. Former subscribers will still be able to get back on the program and access to the entire platform and search engine. But for newcomers, the Substack is where I'm going to be posting comments related to the favorites. But the new thing I'm introducing today is I'm going to also, with each episode, introduce a new bottom fish, the explanation. Why is this an interesting junior, even though it's got a missing piece? And that's part of my goal, to educate the new audience out there that has no familiarity whatsoever with the resource junior sector, because literally it's been in a bear market for 13 years where it has lost audiences, not gained audience.
What do you think of Endurance Gold's exploration plans for 2025?
Well, last week, earlier this week with the last episode, we talked about Sitka Gold and the breakthroughs it had last year, which this year it is positioned to capitalize on. Endurance Gold also had a breakthrough year last year. The prior year, 2023, was ruined because most of the summer season was off limits because of forest fires. Last year, they accomplished several important things, which the company did not get any credit with because, of course, we were in this kind of free-falling capitulation market. Resource sector is doomed. It's heading towards extinction. But this week, they put out their plans for 2025. One of the things that they're starting cautious with only 7,000 meters of drilling planned. But the first goal will be to deal with this late season breakthrough on the Imperial Zone. Now, the Imperial Zone is the original zone at the northern end of the Royal Treasure Shear structure. And that was what was explored 25 years ago. And last year they returned to it and were chasing it farther down plunge and extending it far more than it had been. Yes, the high grade gold of this epizonal orogenic gold system persists at depth. But late in the season, when they pushed the hole deeper than normal, they encountered additional zones just behind it. So it looks like there may be a set of stacked zones that they never really tested, because in the past when they would drill through this zone, they would only go so far until they were past the high grade structure that had the mineralization. Now at depth, they were able to find additional high grade lenses, and so they will start at the shallower part, and this will be quick turnaround. Start drilling holes punching through the Imperial Zone itself. And obviously, they'll take place where they need hole for higher density to stitch it all together, and just see what the extent of these stacked zones are. So this could be a low-hanging fruit that they harvest on fairly early on in the season. The other big breakthrough they had last year was there was a gap between the Imperial Zone and the Eagle Zone within the Royal Shear corridor. And last year they poked holes into it, and they got very, very high grade values. So the mineralization is present in there. They only have a few holes into it. They had seriously visible gold last year that they intersected. Now they can start poking holes all around it to see how well it all hangs together. And they finally have admitted that they are interested in doing a resource estimate. They don't have enough density yet to be comfortable. So part of this year's program will include infill drilling in the shallower part. And I think part of what's pushing them is late last year, they did an analysis of all the antimony values that they are getting. Now, in the long run, what the Reliance project's gold system's all about is to chase it deep, 1,000, 2,000 meters, develop several million high-grade ounces, perhaps more, and underground mine them. But they have mineralization at surface that could potentially support an open pit operation. And because of the zoning of these orogenic systems, the antimony tends to be in the upper part. And so they had a meaningful average 0.2% antimony credit. So if they can develop an open pitable resource at that surface, it's not going to be huge ounces. They'd be lucky if they get it to 1 million ounces of gold, but they would have an antimony credit as a byproduct, and that could attract a lot of interest, especially fast tracking for development purposes. And then the other sort of breakthrough they had last year was on the Olympic property, which they finally decided to wrap up all the payments that they had to do. They decided to do them all in one shot to have title 100% and be able to consolidate the original Reliance claim and the various Olympic properties to the northeast, and it's now all one project. And they've been doing till sampling, talus sampling, and they've identified several geochemical anomalies, 500 meters for the Olympic zone, 600 meters for the Enigma, or something like that. And they're going to do some more geochemical sampling to tighten those targets. They're 3 and 4 kilometers to the northeast of the Royal Shear corridor, and they could be something similar. There could be a repetition of what's going on. I don't know if they'll get to a big point where they'll be able to drill it next year. And then, intriguingly, in this last press release, they talk about having discovered a 500-meter anomaly to the south of the Eagle Zone. And I remember in 2023 when they were testing in the Eagle South area, the grades seem to fizzle out. And they haven't provided any graphics to support this, but it appears that there is an offset at the southern end of this Royal Treasure Shear corridor that may represent the continuation of the mineralized system. So if they get up in there and drill that, and it's all within the permitted area, so they don't have to wait for permits as they do with the Enigma Olympia targets, that could extend the current 1,500-meter strike of the Royal Treasure corridor. So this is a year where everything they're doing is poised to start delivering results, and that may finally be what gets the audience excited about Endurance Gold and its Reliance project in southwestern British Columbia.
What did we learn this week from VR Resources about its Silverback gold play in northwestern Ontario?
On March 26, VR Resources released the drill results for the Silverback project. This had been packaged as either blue sky potential, world-class Hemlo type outcome, or a more modest Hammond Reef type of outcome. Well, what the results showed is that it was neither, and the market was quite unhappy. It's dropped the stock back below 3 cents. They only got 5 holes done for 1,342 meters. They pretty much stopped each hole at about a 200-meter vertical depth, even though the mineralization still looked interesting. They had a big problem with freezing water lines, which really hampered efficiency. And so they drilled 1,342 meters in these 5 holes. The first hole to the south was a bust, but the holes 4 and 5 and 6 they were interesting. 4, 5, and 6 were interesting. Now, this was drilled into the central zone, and what the hypothesis is that based on the geology they had learned from those 2 holes Byron Holbeck had drilled in early 2024, and the geophysical surveys that they had done, they had inferred a series of north-south structures running through this area, and it looked like some sort of porphyry intrusion had come up, possibly digested this sort of northeast-southwest oriented older mafic intrusion that runs up to 0.15% nickel. And the idea was this the system came up, digested the sulfur in the mafic intrusion, and basically created the basis for a deposit that was pretty much hidden behind all the glacial till, the overburden that's in this area. And they did a DCIP survey and had this wonderful chargeability high, right where all their various hypotheses suggested it should be. And the chargeability high is supposed to represent disseminated sulfides. And of course, you don't want it to just be iron sulfides like pyrite. You want gold to be associated with it, which in these systems, it very often is. And you can't see the gold in this type of mineralization. So what they saw had them fairly excited with the 3 holes that they drilled in that, or at least the 2 that were in the middle part there. And then they stepped to the northeast about 1,400 meters. There was an old 1980s six-channel EM conductor that had never been tested. And they drilled a couple of holes into that, and it also looked interesting. And when they got the results, they were pretty disappointed. Wherever there was like intense shearing, which is where the gold mineralization should show up, where they had lots of pyrite, well, they pretty much only had pyrite. They had a bit of chalcopyrite, but the gold grades were simply anomalous in all these areas, up to 160 ppb. And that, of course, is not a discovery, so the market really reacted negatively. And I looked at the news release, and I talked to Justin Daly, and the initial purpose of this, it was a scout drilling program based not so much on geochemistry, but based more on inferences from a couple of holes drilled sort of randomly based on digium targets rather than the IP targets. And there was one outcrop which had 9.8 gram per ton gold and 5.6% copper. That was really interesting. And so they did drill holes near this area. But as they studied all the stuff that they had, all the results, logged all the core and looked at it, they realized, these north-south structures that we thought were the key controls, they are not important. And they included a graphic in their press release, which was a resistivity slice from the IP survey at a 200-meter depth, pretty much the sort of vertical depth limit that they drilled these holes in. And what emerged from this is that there is a northeast-southwest structure involved, and several of them, and they added them as red dashed lines to the graphic. And if you just sort of glanced at this, you wouldn't know what it meant. And if you read the news release just cursorily, you wouldn't really gather much from it. And they've also looked again at that sample that has that very high grade, and they sort of realize, there's folds at a it looks like this is part of a fold nose. And they now have confirmation that, in fact, the Lac des Milles greenstone belt, the part of which overlaps in the southern part of the property, but not in the area where they had been drilling, as mapped by the government geologists. Where they were drilling was thought to be the Marmion tonalite rocks. It's a granite-type rocks, not the greatest host rock. It is the host rock for the Hammond Reef project that's on a splay that comes off the Quetico Fault farther west, but that's a low-grade system. The Hemlo system, which is 150 whatever plus kilometers to the east in the Wawa area, that's actually within greenstone belt rock. So they now know that at least another couple kilometers to the north, including this area that they're keen about, where they now have this northeast corridor, these are the greenstone type rocks, the kind that under deformation bend and create the sort of special conditions, especially in these so-called nose folds where the gold comes in to allow gold enrichment to take place. But obviously they didn't hit a Hemlo. Of course, Hemlo itself took 80 holes to finally hit, and there's obviously no big disseminated Hammond Reef type system there. But with this new orientation, there's plenty of room. It's now like they've got 3 to 4 kilometers of structure within greenstone rocks, overlapping with these this mafic intrusion that's in there, with evidence of a porphyry intrusion nearby that may have been the engine that helped move the fluids. The geological context is alive. They've got gold smoke and pathfinder smoke all over the place. They now need to go back to it. And of course, what the market doesn't like is, okay, it's not a sniper kill shot. It's not easy. You don't just drill into the middle of this IP anomaly and lo and behold, you have a giant deposit. But there is plenty of room for a Hemlo type system that's associated with shearing in deformed greenstone rocks with gold smoke all over the place, with all the pathfinders associated with the Hemlo type system present. But the market doesn't like it, that it may be 6 months before they're in a position to drill. Right now, there's still 3 feet of snow on the property, and the they won't be able to get in there until June. And the first thing they're going to do is go back to that outcrop with that high grade value, and they're going to strip it properly, trench it to see what's going on there, to see what the orientations of these folds are. Because when you're in a corridor like this, these folds will typically repeat themselves. And because most of it's covered with glacial overburden, they really don't want to go prospecting with a drill bit. They have only $750,000 left and a grumpy market. Shareholders had hoped for instant gratification, probably going to be exiting the next while, looking for something new and sexier, where the first drill hole might get lucky. And they will do till sampling to find if in the till itself, down ice from this corridor, there's evidence, okay, here the gold in till jumps. Here's where we're going to focus, maybe do some stripping and trenching there to expose what's going on and set the stage for a follow-up drill program next year. And as far as the Empire project's concerned, well, they only got smoke with that either. They did not find the enriched reef that would have elevated palladium and platinum values, but they now know that area is fertile, and they have a fairly large land position there. So that's going to be a summer of target development. And so that's kind of a bummer for this favor. It doesn't look like anything, momentous can happen until, say, maybe September, October, after this target generation work is done. But we can't forget that they have their Nevada projects. They've got the 2 copper projects. One of them has a gold component, Bonita in the northern part of Nevada. And then there's New Boston, where they drilled last year, which is more sort of a copper moly type system that they can return to. And they have the Big Ten Amsoil project in the Walker Lane to the south, where there's lots of undrilled potential left on that. And Trump's order from last week of March 20th, where he includes gold along with copper and all that as metals that the agencies are not supposed to be blocking the exploration for, that could be a big deal for a junior like VR Resources. Obviously, it doesn't have the money right now to do anything meaningful, but there are groups that have money that might be partners that wish to farm in on these projects. So even though VR Resources for the moment looks down and out, it is far from that situation. And if we get into a secular gold bull market and money finally starts coming back into this sector, we will see VR Resources a lot higher than we see it now at 3 cents, without even having drilled an additional hole, but simply because the optimism that with all this geology being done and the picture fleshed out ever more and more, yes, now we believe, throw more money at these targets and the deposit will be found.
Why is Bold Ventures, Inc. a member of your bottom fish collection?
Ironically, Bold Ventures has been in this area where VR Resources is currently operating, where they moved in last year after optioning several projects from Byron Hulbig. It's in that whole sort of Quetico fault area, also known as the Shabandawan district. They've had the Traxon project, which covers 15-kilometer splay coming off this Quetico fault. It's in the eastern part. They're 50-50 joint venture with the Lac des Mille Lac First Nation group. They did this deal in 2021, and the First Nation group did participate. They're now diluting down. This is Marmion tonalite hosted structure, so it's not going to be, lucrative like a greenstone belt hosted structure, but they did encounter high grade mineralization there. But what their new important story is the Birchell project, which they optioned several years ago, and this property sits to the south of Gold Shore's Moss Lake project. Now, the Moss Lake deposit is this 30 million ton low grade system that was a bottom fish from past cycles. In the 2010 early part, it had been spun out. It was actually called Moss Lake Resources. Its economics were always just barely in the money at whatever prevailing gold price we have. Wesdome eventually absorbed it. Then it got spun out, and Goldshore is now working on a PEA for it, which they hope to have out. Now, that's to the north of the Birchell project. The Birchell project is to the south, and the northwestern or western part of it has had exploration in the past, which hit mineralization, but did not really hit anything particularly spectacular. But what the Bold Ventures group has done is they've taken the geophysics and realized this looks like a parallel structural trend heading in a northeast direction that's south of the area that has had all the historical exploration, and they did some prospecting work last year and came up with some high-grade values. So while the Moss Lake system is a sort of disseminated gold system, perhaps this parallel structure could be a high-grade traditional orogenic system. So they are going to go back in there this year to take a much closer look at that. Their challenge is that they do not have any money. They're going to go on the fundraising road very soon to try and raise money to get things rolling. The $200,000 negative working capital they have is all pretty much owed to insiders. The person who's been in charge of it since 2019, 2020 is David Graham. He's part of the Richard Nemes, John Harvey group from before. Richard Nemes passed away in 2019. Bold got rolled back 5-for-1. Although management owns only about 14% of the stock, the shareholder base is a lot of parties friendly to the company. They've kept this thing alive, and a big missing piece changed last year. And that was when Bruce McLaughlin, who runs Emerald Geological Services, he joined the company and brought along as chief operating officer, and he brought along Coleman Robertson as the exploration VP, and he's been doing this type of exploration management services for 40 years, and Emerald has been around since 2001, and he's done work for the Nemes companies in the past, and now he's in there, sort of the hands-on person. He's potential successor to David Graham, who's currently CEO and could eventually become chairman while Bruce takes on the CEO role. They do a good job on the website. They are familiar with marketing. Their stock is cheap. They're just getting going. They have the Farwell project, which they had auctioned several years ago, which is both an iron formation gold play and a VMS play in the Wawa region. It's potentially a candidate for a farm out, though right now I think they want to see where this market goes. But there is an interesting kicker to this company. They have a 10% carried interest in the Black Horse chromite deposit, which is in the Ring of Fire. In fact, it's the only major chromite deposit that Wyloo does not own in this area after buying Noront a couple of years ago for $600 million. Now, Wyloo is focused on the Eagle's Nest nickel deposit. That was supposed to be the next Voisey's Bay in 2007. That's when we had the last great Canadian area play. All the stocks in that area went crazy. The project has become bogged down in a bit of a sort of First Nations mess. To get to this remote area, you're going to have to build transportation corridors along these north-south running eskers that go through the traditional territory of the Martins Falls and Webequie nations. And these First Nations initially were, not interested in seeing stuff developed up there, but then they came under the sway of the NGO crowd, the anti-mining lobby, the Ontario Bob Ray-led anti-mining lobby, and it's all become very confused about whether or not anything should be done in this stranded area of northern Ontario. But the Black Horse chromite deposit itself is like 85 million tons of 34% CR203. there is nothing like this anywhere else in North America. Chromium comes from South Africa. It comes from Kazakhstan. It comes from Turkey. These are not really reliable sources. And Cliffs in the 2010 decade had wanted to build an integrated stainless steel input supply chain in North America, which is why they had the Dakar project of FPX nickel in British Columbia, and they of course developed the Bloom deposit up in the Labrador Trough, and then this chromium they got into because chromium is also an input for stainless steel, and they ended up being torpedoed by a hedge fund, which kicked out management and sold all these assets, which is how Noront ended up with it, and it's now in the hands of Wyloo, and KWG now owns the 100% working interest, 90% net interest in the Black Horse project, and it's right next to the Eagle's Nest. So if there's a move to do something about these chromium assets and develop them and build the road down to Lake Superior, where there can be a ferrochromium plant to make a ferrochromium out of the chromite ore, North America would have its own domestic supply of chromium, which would be a big deal. And then if Wyloo decides to pivot to this away from the nickel and develop it, they would probably clean up the KWG interest and that 10% carried interest. And this is a solid carried interest, not one of these bogus ones where you never get paid out. That could potentially be a $10 to $20 million windfall for Bold Ventures. At the moment, nothing happening on the chromium front, but this is sitting inside the company. It doesn't cost them anything. It's part of a bigger picture related to the strategic security supply issues of North America. But their focus is that as an exploration junior, the Birchell project as the primary property that they want to focus on this year. The Traxon is something that they could go back to when people start believing that $3,000 plus gold is the new reality, not just a stepping stone on the way back to below $2,000. The Farwell project's also potentially interesting, and they picked up a new project called East Springpole, which is just to the northeast of the Springpole project, which First Mining Gold has at the pre-feasibility level. And there's been some work done that showed iron formation values along the trend of East Springpole. So they picked that up for staking earlier this year. So that's potentially also something that's interesting. So an Ontario-focused exploration junior. It's in a similar region as as VR Resources is. They're in the more traditional rock types in that particular area, and it's a bottom fish trade. 6 cents, needs to do a financing, and that's the sort of company that I dig up, figure out their story, and put in the bottom fish collection. We got 108 such companies in our bottom fish collection.
John, thank you so much for the update.
You're welcome, Jim.
We've been talking with John Kaiser. I'm Jim Goddard.
Comments made on Kaiser Watch are an expression of opinion only and should not be construed in any manner whatsoever as a recommendation to buy or sell any financial instrument at any time. Archived online at kaiserresearch.com.